Right now, somewhere behind your eyes, your mind is doing dozens of things you never asked it to do and never had to learn how to do at all. Deciding which sounds in the room are worth noticing, filling in the small blank spot in the center of your vision so smoothly you've never once seen the gap, getting ready in a few minutes or a few hours to write you a dream. Tonight, we're going to look at 28 small, strange, completely ordinary things your mind does. The twitch before sleep, the dream you'll forget in 90 seconds, the reason a word gets stuck in your head. Nothing here is a problem to solve. It's just what a mind quietly does. Let's start with the jolt. The jolt right before you fall asleep. Just as you're drifting off, you might suddenly feel like you're falling, and your whole body jerks, sometimes hard enough to wake you up completely. This is called a hypnic jerk or a sleep start, and it's remarkably common. Studies estimate the large majority of people experience it at some point, some far more often than others. Nobody knows with complete certainty why it happens, but the leading explanation involves a small mismatch in timing. As you fall asleep, your muscles begin to relax and your breathing slows, and some researchers believe your brain, monitoring the body's systems, briefly misreads this relaxation as a sign that you're actually falling, triggering a quick protective muscle contraction to catch yourself the way you would if you genuinely stumbled while walking. It's entirely harmless. It's also more likely to happen when you're overtired, stressed, or have had a lot of caffeine, your nervous system running a little hotter than usual, right at the exact moment it's supposed to be powering down. A tiny, ancient reflex, left over from some much older need to catch yourself, quietly misfiring once in a while for no reason at all except that your mind was trying to keep you safe. Some reflexes protect you from falling. Others protect you from something much stranger, your own hands. Why you can't tickle yourself. Try to tickle the sole of your own foot, and something odd happens, almost nothing. The same touch, delivered by someone else, might make you dissolve into helpless laughter. Delivered by your own hand, it barely registers. The explanation lies in a process called an efference copy. Whenever your brain sends a signal to move a part of your body, it simultaneously sends a kind of internal preview of that movement to other parts of the brain, a prediction of exactly what sensation is about to happen and when. Your cerebellum uses this prediction to quietly cancel out the resulting sensation, since a predicted, self-caused touch carries far less useful information than an unpredicted one. Evolutionarily, an unexpected touch from something else might be a threat, or an insect or another person worth your full attention. A touch you caused yourself, exactly when and where you expected it, mostly isn't. Researchers have even built simple robotic devices that introduce a tiny delay between a person's hand movement and the resulting touch, and found that even a fraction of a second of lag is enough to make a self-inflicted tickle feel noticeably more ticklish because the prediction and the sensation no longer line up quite perfectly. Your own mind quietly canceling out its own signals thousands of times a day, so busy filtering what it already expects that it barely has to notice most of what you do to yourself at all. Some signals get quietly canceled, others get strangely, suddenly doubled, a feeling of having lived this exact moment before. The moment that feels like it's already happened. Almost everyone has experienced it, a sudden, eerie certainty that you've lived through this exact moment before. The same room, the same conversation, the same small gesture, even though you know rationally that you haven't. Déjà vu, French for already seen, has been recorded and wondered about for well over a century. And while researchers still don't have one single, fully agreed upon explanation, several credible theories have emerged from studying it. One leading idea involves a brief timing hiccup in how your brain processes new information. Your brain may occasionally send a new experience to your memory-related regions slightly faster than usual, so that by the time the present moment experience arrives for full conscious processing, a version of it has technically already been logged as a memory a fraction of a second earlier, creating the eerie sensation that you're now remembering something happening right now. Researchers studying patients with certain forms of epilepsy affecting the temporal lobe, the brain region heavily involved in memory, have found that stimulating that specific area can reliably trigger the sensation of déjà vu directly. Strong evidence that whatever's happening, it's rooted in that part of the brain's memory circuitry. A brief, harmless glitch in your mind's own filing system. A memory being created and retrieved almost at the very same instant, close enough together to feel, for just a second, like time folded quietly in on itself. Déjà vu makes one moment feel doubled. There's a different trick your mind plays that makes one word or idea feel like it's suddenly, mysteriously, everywhere. Why a new word suddenly seems to follow you everywhere. Learn a new word, or notice a car model you've never paid attention to before, and something strange often happens in the days that follow. You suddenly seem to encounter it constantly, in conversation, in the news, parked on your own street. This is sometimes called the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon, or more formally, the frequency illusion, and the honest explanation is a little deflating. The thing almost certainly wasn't appearing more often at all. Your attention to it simply changed. This happens through a combination of two ordinary mental habits working together. First, selective attention. Once something is freshly on your mind, your brain becomes quietly primed to notice it, filtering it out of the huge amount of everyday background information it would normally discard without you ever registering it consciously. Second, confirmation bias. Each new sighting feels like meaningful evidence of a real pattern, while all the times you didn't notice it go, understandably, unremarked and forgotten. The car was probably always on your street. The word was probably already being used just as often. Your mind didn't discover a new pattern in the world. It just quietly turned up the volume on something that had been playing, unnoticed, the whole time. Nothing in the world got busier. Your own attention just finally showed up to something it had been walking past, without complaint, for years. Some patterns are your mind noticing too much. Some memories, on the other hand, disappear almost the moment they're made. Why most of your dreams are already gone by breakfast. Most people dream for a total of 1 to 2 hours every single night, across several separate dream periods. And yet the average person remembers only a fragment of one dream, if any at all, by the time they're fully awake. Sleep researchers believe this rapid forgetting is tied to the specific brain chemistry of REM sleep, the stage where most vivid dreaming happens. Levels of two neurotransmitters closely linked to memory formation, norepinephrine and acetylcholine's precise balance, shift significantly during REM sleep, in ways that appear to make it genuinely harder for the brain to properly encode dream content into lasting memory while it's happening. There's also a simple, practical factor: the transition out of sleep itself. Studies have found that people who wake up naturally and lie still for even a minute or two before moving recall dreams significantly more often than people who wake abruptly to an alarm and immediately get up. The physical act of moving and engaging with the day seems to actively overwrite whatever fragile dream memory was still forming. This is why a dream that feels so vivid and detailed in the first waking moment can feel completely unreachable just 5 minutes later. Not because it wasn't real to you, but because your mind, quite literally, wasn't built to keep it. An hour or two of vivid, personal, unrepeatable experience, most nights of your life, built, felt, and then gently, almost entirely let go of by the time you reach for your first cup of tea. Dreams disappear the moment you stop paying attention to them. Your mind, though, is never really doing nothing, even in the quietest moments. What your mind is doing when it's doing nothing at all. Lie quietly with your eyes closed, not focused on any task, and brain scans show something surprising. Your brain doesn't go quiet. A specific network of regions spanning the front and middle of the brain actually becomes more active. Neuroscientists call this the default mode network, first clearly identified in the early 2000s, and it appears to be the brain's baseline activity during mind-wandering, daydreaming, and unfocused reflection, active by default, quieting down only when your attention turns toward a specific external task. This network seems closely tied to self-reflection, imagining future events, remembering personal past experiences, and thinking about other people's perspectives, a kind of internal narrator quietly running in the background, stitching together your sense of who you are and where you fit whenever there's nothing more urgent demanding your attention. Some researchers believe this background activity is essential, not wasteful. That unfocused mind-wandering plays a genuine role in creativity, problem-solving, and emotional processing, which is part of why good ideas so often arrive in the shower or on a walk, rather than while staring directly at the problem. Doing nothing was never really nothing at all. Somewhere behind a quiet, unfocused mind, a whole network was awake the entire time, quietly tending to the story of you. The mind stays busy even at rest. Once in a while, though, it stumbles on the way in or out of sleep, briefly, harmlessly, and more commonly than you'd think. Waking up, unable to move, for a few harmless seconds. During REM sleep, your brain temporarily switches off voluntary control of most of your skeletal muscles, a state called REM atonia, almost certainly to prevent you from physically acting out your dreams. Occasionally, your mind becomes consciously aware and alert slightly before this muscle paralysis has fully switched back off, leaving you briefly awake, aware of your surroundings, and completely unable to move or speak. This is called sleep paralysis, and research suggests a substantial share of people experience it at least once in their life, some more frequently than others. It typically lasts anywhere from a few seconds to a couple of minutes and resolves entirely on its own, usually the moment you're able to make any small physical movement at all, like wiggling a single finger, which seems to help the brain complete the transition back to full waking motor control. Some people also experience vivid hallucinations during an episode, a felt presence in the room, or pressure on the chest, which researchers believe results from dream-related brain activity briefly bleeding into an otherwise awake, conscious mind. It's unsettling in the moment, but entirely benign, and becomes less frequent for most people once sleep is more regular and less fragmented. A brief overlap between two states that almost never touch: awake and still dreaming just slightly, gone again in moments, as harmlessly as it arrived. Some nights, your mind briefly gets stuck between states. Other times, it simply won't let something go, even something small. Why an unfinished task is so hard to stop thinking about. In the 1920s, Soviet psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik noticed something odd while sitting in a busy Vienna cafe. Waiters seemed to remember complex, unpaid orders in perfect detail, but promptly forgot all the details the moment a bill was settled and paid. She turned this observation into a formal study, giving participants a series of simple tasks and puzzles, interrupting some before completion while allowing others to finish naturally. Consistently, people remembered the details of interrupted, unfinished tasks significantly better than the ones they'd completed. This pattern, now called the Zeigarnik effect, suggests the mind holds open, unresolved tasks in a kind of active mental tension, keeping them more readily accessible in memory, almost as a built-in reminder system nudging you to return and finish. Once a task is completed, that active tension releases, and the mind is free to file the details away and move on. It's part of why an unanswered text message, an unfinished chapter, or an unresolved argument can occupy so much more mental space late at night than the details of tasks you actually completed earlier that same day. Your mind quietly keeping a small light on for anything it considers not yet closed. Not a flaw, just an old, useful habit. A mind that keeps gently returning to what's unfinished, simply because, once, remembering the open task was what kept the meal actually getting paid for. An unfinished task lingers through the day. Toward the end of the night, your dreams themselves start changing shape too. Why your longest, strangest dreams come just before waking. Sleep isn't one uniform state. It cycles through distinct stages roughly every 90 minutes, alternating between lighter and deeper non-REM sleep and periods of REM, the stage most closely associated with vivid dreaming. Early in the night, REM periods tend to be short, sometimes just a few minutes, but with each 90-minute cycle that passes, REM periods gradually lengthen, while deep non-REM sleep correspondingly shortens, meaning the REM period right before natural waking, typically in the early morning hours, is usually the longest and most elaborate of the entire night. This is a large part of why the dreams people remember most vividly tend to feel unusually long, detailed, and narratively strange. They're often genuinely being generated during the night's longest, most active dreaming window. Immediately before waking naturally captures them before they have time to fade. It also explains why waking to an alarm partway through the night can sometimes cut a dream off abruptly, mid-scene, leaving a strange, unresolved feeling you weren't imagining that the dream simply stopped. In a very real sense, it did. Your mind saves its longest, strangest stories for last, quietly building toward morning, in case you happen to wake up gently enough to catch the ending. dreams grow longer toward morning. Once you're awake, though, your mind is quietly doing something just as strange with everything you learned the day before. How sleep quietly files away everything you learned today. Sleep isn't just rest for the body. For memory specifically, it appears to be an active, essential part of the process, not a pause in learning, but a continuation of it. During sleep, particularly during deep non-REM stages, the hippocampus, a small, seahorse-shaped structure deep in the brain, heavily involved in forming new memories, appears to replay fragments of the day's experiences in compressed, sped-up bursts, sometimes many times faster than they originally happened. Researchers believe this replay helps gradually transfer memories from the hippocampus, which holds new information rather temporarily, into the cortex, the brain's outer layer, for more stable, long-term storage, a process often called memory consolidation, essentially moving today's experiences from short-term holding into a more permanent archive. Studies consistently show that people who sleep well after learning new information, whether a physical skill, a list of words, or a new concept, perform better on recall tests the next day than people given the same learning material but kept awake, even when both groups spend equal time actively studying. Every night, without you doing anything at all, some quiet internal librarian is taking everything you learned that day and carefully, patiently, moving it somewhere it'll actually be there for you tomorrow. Sleep quietly organizes memory on its own. Getting there in the first place, though, is something people have tried to help along for a very long time. Why counting sheep doesn't actually work very well. Counting sheep is one of the oldest, most widely repeated pieces of sleep advice in the English-speaking world, and, according to actual sleep research, one of the least effective. A well-known study from researchers at Oxford in the early 2000s compared insomniac participants who tried counting sheep to others who were asked instead to imagine a calming, detailed scene like a waterfall or a peaceful beach. The sheep counters fell asleep, on average slightly slower than people given no technique at all. The likely explanation is that counting sheep is simply too monotonous to hold attention and not absorbing enough to crowd out other, more anxious or active thoughts, leaving plenty of mental space for the mind to wander right back to whatever's actually keeping it awake, all while performing the counting on a kind of distracted autopilot. The imaginative distraction technique worked better precisely because it demanded more active mental engagement, enough rich detail to genuinely occupy the mind's attention without being stimulating or emotionally charged enough to keep it alert. It turns out the mind doesn't fall asleep by counting anything at all. It falls asleep by being given somewhere calm and detailed enough to fully, gently get lost in. Some images help the mind drift off gently. Others get stuck there, replaying themselves long after you've stopped playing. Why you see falling blocks after hours of playing a game. Play a visually repetitive game for several hours, falling blocks, matching tiles, scrolling patterns, and it's common to notice fragments of it drifting through your mind later, especially right at the edge of sleep, shapes rotating, patterns sliding into place, unprompted and involuntary. This is sometimes called the Tetris effect, named after the famously simple falling block game, though researchers had documented similar effects in other repetitive visual and cognitive tasks even earlier. A well-known 2000 study found the effect occurring even in amnesic patients who couldn't consciously remember having played the game at all. suggesting it operates on a level below ordinary conscious memory. The imagery tends to appear most often during hypnagogia, the drowsy, semi-conscious transition period between wakefulness and sleep, when the mind's usual filtering and organizing processes are relaxing, and recently repeated patterns of visual attention seem more likely to surface on their own, unprompted by any conscious thought. It isn't unique to games, either. Similar involuntary replay has been reported after long, visually repetitive activities like rock climbing, or scrolling through similar-looking images for hours, or even after intense driving on a long, monotonous highway. Give your attention to the same simple pattern for long enough, and your mind, quite innocently, keeps a small copy of it running for a while after you've stopped. A pattern it learned so well, it forgot, for a moment, that it was supposed to stop. Some patterns replay on their own, privately. Some things spread from person to person, almost instantly, without anyone quite meaning them to. Why a yawn spreads through a room. See someone yawn, or even just read the word yawn a few times, and there's a good chance you'll feel the urge yourself within moments. One of the most reliably contagious behaviors documented in human psychology. Researchers have found that contagious yawning tends to appear later in childhood than the reflex to yawn itself, typically emerging around age 4 or 5 and becoming more frequent as children develop stronger social and empathic skills. A pattern that's led many researchers to connect contagious yawning to empathy and social bonding. Supporting this idea, some studies have found people yawn contagiously more often in response to close friends and family than to strangers. And brain imaging research has linked contagious yawning to activity in regions associated with social processing and empathy, including some of the same regions involved in recognizing and mirroring others' emotional states. The exact underlying mechanism is still debated, and not every researcher agrees on how strongly it connects to empathy specifically. Some propose it may be more related to simple attention and behavioral mimicry in general, but the pattern itself is well documented. Yawns move through a room the way a mood sometimes does, quietly, from one nervous system to the next, mostly without anyone choosing it consciously at all. A small, involuntary signal passed silently from person to person, maybe in some old and gentle way, a mind's way of saying it noticed you, and it's tired too. Some things pass quietly between people. Some things your own mind decided long ago weren't worth keeping at all. Why you can't remember being a baby. Almost no one has any genuine, reliable memories from before roughly age 2 or 3. And memories before around age 7 tend to be sparse and fragmentary, a well-documented pattern researchers call infantile amnesia. It's not that nothing happened or that the infant brain wasn't recording anything at all. Infants and toddlers clearly learn constantly, forming plenty of short-term and procedural memories along the way. The gap seems to lie specifically in forming the kind of detailed, narrative personal memories adults rely on, tied to a particular time and place. One major factor is the hippocampus itself, which continues developing significantly throughout early childhood. The neural infrastructure needed for stable, long-term autobiographical memory simply isn't fully built yet in the first few years of life. Language development also plays a meaningful role, since the ability to narrate and organize an experience into a story seems to help memories become more retrievable later. Interestingly, some research suggests very young children can recall specific events for a period of months or even a couple of years, memories that, in most people, eventually fade anyway, well before adulthood, once the earlier, less stable memory system gets gradually replaced by the more durable one adults rely on for the rest of their lives. Your very first years happened to a mind that was still, quite literally, building the shelving it would need to keep anything on. No fault of yours, and no fault of theirs, that so little of it stayed. Some memories fade for lack of shelving. Other things stick because your mind, quietly, decided the bad news mattered more. Why one criticism outweighs 5 compliments. Receive 5 pieces of warm, genuine praise and 1 small piece of criticism, and it's the criticism that tends to linger, replaying itself long after the compliments have quietly faded from memory. Psychologists call this the negativity bias, a well-documented tendency for negative experiences, information, and emotions to have a disproportionately larger impact on the mind than equally significant positive ones. It shows up across an enormous range of research, from how quickly people notice angry faces in a crowd compared to happy ones, to how much more strongly a single loss affects us compared to an equivalent gain. The likely evolutionary logic is straightforward. For most of human history, failing to notice something dangerous carried far higher stakes than failing to notice something pleasant. A missed threat could be fatal. A missed compliment, comparatively, cost very little. Minds that weighted danger and criticism more heavily simply had a survival advantage, generation after generation, long before modern life made most day-to-day criticism far less dangerous than it once was. Understanding this bias doesn't make it disappear, but researchers note that simply knowing it exists can help. Recognizing that a piece of criticism feels louder than 5 compliments, not because it's 5 times truer, but because an old part of the mind is still listening for danger, exactly the way it always has. An ancient alarm system, still faithfully doing its old job, even now, in a world that mostly just needed you to hear that your coworker liked your idea. The mind holds on to sharp edges more tightly than soft ones, but some sounds, softened just right, can actually help it let go for the night. Why a steady hum can help a restless mind settle. For many people, a steady, unchanging sound, rainfall, a fan, gentle static, makes it noticeably easier to fall and stay asleep, especially in an environment with unpredictable outside noise. The leading explanation involves a principle called auditory masking. A steady, consistent sound occupies a certain amount of the brain's auditory processing bandwidth, effectively raising the threshold a new, sudden sound needs to cross before it's noticeable enough to register as a disturbance and potentially wake you. Without that steady background sound, a sudden noise, like a door closing elsewhere in a building or a car passing outside, represents a sharp, attention-grabbing change from near total silence, precisely the kind of abrupt change a sleeping brain is evolutionarily wired to notice and respond to. A consistent hum smooths out that contrast, making sudden sounds proportionally less jarring by comparison. Research on this effect is genuinely mixed on exactly how much white noise improves overall sleep quality on its own, with some studies finding modest benefits and others finding little measurable difference. But for the specific, common problem of being woken by unpredictable environmental noise, the underlying masking principle is well supported. Not a lullaby exactly, just something steady enough that your mind can finally stop listening quite so hard for what might happen next. A steady sound can quiet the mind. Total silence and total darkness, though, can do something far stranger to it. What happens when the mind runs out of real signal? Sit in a completely dark, silent room, or stare at a uniform field of blank color or static for a prolonged period, and many people begin to experience faint hallucinations, shapes, colors, or sounds that aren't actually there at all. This is called the Ganzfeld effect, German for entire field, first studied formally in the mid-20th century. When the brain is deprived of its usual stream of varied sensory input, it doesn't simply go quiet and wait. Some researchers believe it begins amplifying whatever faint internal noise or ambiguous signal remains, effectively turning up the gain on very weak signals until they become consciously noticeable, even though they carry no real external information. This connects to a broader principle sometimes summarized as the brain being a prediction machine rather than a passive recorder. Normally, it constantly compares incoming sensory data against its own predictions and fills in gaps automatically and seamlessly, largely without your awareness. Remove the real data almost entirely, and that same filling in process has nothing solid left to anchor to, so it starts generating its own faint, unanchored content instead. Modern sensory deprivation tanks and simple experiments like staring at a blank wall for an extended period can produce a milder version of the same effect, a reminder that perception was never simply a window onto the world. It was always, quietly, a little bit of a guess. Give your mind nothing real to look at for long enough, and it will, gently and without any bad intention, start showing you something anyway. Some minds start seeing things in empty rooms. Some minds are simply built to run on a different clock than everyone else's. Why some minds wake up early and some stay up late. Some people wake naturally with the first light of morning, alert and ready. Others don't feel genuinely awake until well past noon and stay sharpest late into the night. This isn't simply a matter of habit or discipline. It's substantially rooted in biology. Your internal circadian clock, the roughly 24-hour cycle governing sleep, hormone release, and body temperature, is influenced by specific genes, including one called PER, or period, first identified through research on fruit flies in the 1970s, and later found to have close counterparts in humans. Small natural variations in these genes measurably shift a person's natural sleep-wake timing earlier or later. This natural variation is often described using the term chronotype, and it tends to shift meaningfully across a person's life. Adolescence, for genuine biological reasons tied to shifting melatonin release, commonly experience a natural pull toward later sleep and wake times, a pattern many school schedules work directly against, before chronotype gradually shifts earlier again with age. Neither pattern is inherently better or more disciplined than the other. A night owl forced onto an early morning schedule experiences something researchers describe as similar to mild chronic jet lag, simply from being persistently out of step with their own body's genuine internal timing. Your own best hours were, in a real sense, quietly decided before you had any say in the matter, written into a gene with a fittingly simple name, long before you ever picked a bedtime for yourself. Some minds run on different clocks. A rare few have learned to do something even stranger: step inside their own dream and know it. The dream where you know you're dreaming. A lucid dream is one in which the dreamer becomes aware, while still asleep and dreaming, that what they're experiencing isn't real, and in many cases, that awareness allows for at least some deliberate influence over the dream's events. For a long time, this remained largely a subjective, hard-to-verify claim. That changed in the late 1970s and early 1980s, when sleep researchers, working with trained lucid dreamers, found a clever way to bridge the gap. Since eye muscles remain active during REM sleep, even though the rest of the body is paralyzed, participants were asked to move their eyes in a specific, prearranged pattern the moment they became lucid within a dream, a signal that showed up clearly and verifiably on lab recording equipment in real time, while brain activity confirmed the person genuinely remained in REM sleep throughout. This gave researchers a genuine, real-time communication channel between a sleeping brain and the outside world, direct evidence that conscious, deliberate awareness really can coexist with the dreaming brain state, rather than simply being a distorted memory reconstructed after waking. Studies suggest a meaningful share of people experience at least one spontaneous lucid dream in their lifetime, and certain techniques, like keeping a dream journal or performing regular reality checks during waking hours, appear to genuinely increase how often it happens for people who practice them consistently. A mind fully asleep, fully dreaming, and still, somehow, awake enough inside its own story to recognize it as one, proven, verified, and signaled out through eyes that never stopped moving the whole time. Some minds learn to steer a dream on purpose. Others, at night specifically, find that ordinary worry suddenly gets louder, uninvited. Why worries feel bigger after midnight. A concern that felt entirely manageable at 3 in the afternoon can feel enormous and unshakable at 1 in the morning. A pattern so common that researchers have specifically studied why nighttime seems to amplify anxious thinking. Part of the explanation is physiological. Cortisol, a hormone closely tied to alertness and stress response, naturally follows its own daily rhythm, and for many people, late evening represents a relative low point before it begins rising again toward morning, leaving fewer of the body's own natural buffers active right when anxious thoughts tend to surface. There's also a simpler situational factor. Nighttime removes most of the day's usual distractions. Work, conversation, tasks, and general sensory business all typically fade at night, leaving the mind with far less external input competing for its attention, and worry, like most thoughts, tends to expand to fill whatever space is available to it. Cognitive research also points to reduced activity during fatigue in parts of the prefrontal cortex responsible for rational reappraisal, the mental process of calmly re-examining a worry and placing it in reasonable proportion. A tired prefrontal cortex is measurably less effective at this kind of regulation, while the brain's more reactive, threat-sensitive regions remain comparatively unaffected by tiredness, tipping the balance toward feeling rather than reasoning. The worry itself usually isn't lying to you about existing. It's just arriving at an hour when the part of your mind best equipped to keep it in proportion has, quite understandably, already gone to bed. Nighttime worry has a real biological rhythm behind it. Your eyes, meanwhile, have been quietly working around a gap in your vision your entire life. The hole in your vision you've never once seen. Each of your eyes has a small blind spot, a patch on the retina with no light-sensing cells at all, located exactly where the optic nerve exits the eye on its way to the brain. And yet, in ordinary daily life, you have almost certainly never consciously noticed a gap in your vision, not even once. This is because your brain doesn't leave that gap blank. Using surrounding visual information, along with input from your other eye covering a slightly different angle, your visual system actively constructs a plausible fill-in for the missing patch, extending nearby patterns, colors, and textures seamlessly across the gap, a process called perceptual filling in. Simple demonstrations can reveal the blind spot directly. Close one eye, focus on a fixed point, and a small object positioned at the right distance and angle will genuinely seem to vanish, replaced smoothly by whatever background pattern surrounds it, rather than appearing as a dark hole or gap. This filling in isn't a rare, special trick reserved for the blind spot alone. It's a small, clear example of something your visual system is doing constantly, everywhere, smoothing over gaps, ambiguities, and missing information so seamlessly that you never notice the seams at all. There has been a genuine hole in your vision every waking moment of your life, and your mind has quietly, competently, never once let you actually see it. Your mind fills in what it can't see. Sometimes, though, trying too directly for something is exactly what keeps it out of reach. Why trying hard to fall asleep is what keeps you awake? Lie in bed telling yourself firmly that you need to fall asleep right now. And for many people, that very effort seems to backfire. The harder they try, the more awake and alert they feel. Psychologists call this paradoxical intention, and sleep researchers have studied a specific version of it called sleep effort. The surprising, well-documented finding that deliberately, forcefully trying to fall asleep is itself associated with taking longer to actually do so. Falling asleep isn't something you actively do, in the way you might actively finish a task or solve a problem. It's closer to a letting go process, one that depends on the body's arousal and stress systems winding down. The mental effort and self-monitoring involved in trying hard, checking the clock, evaluating whether it's working yet, feeling frustrated when it isn't, all activate exactly the kind of alert, effortful brain activity that's fundamentally incompatible with drifting off. Clinical treatments for chronic insomnia often directly address this pattern, sometimes counterintuitively encouraging people to get out of bed if they're not falling asleep quickly, rather than lying there straining for it, reducing the association between bed and frustrated effort rather than reinforcing it night after night. Sleep was never something you could successfully force. It only ever really arrives once you've quietly stopped insisting that it hurry up. Letting go helps sleep arrive. Once it does, the outside world doesn't always stay outside. Sometimes it quietly slips into the dream itself. When a sound in the room becomes part of your dream, a phone buzzing on the nightstand becomes, in the dream, a swarm of bees. Rain against the window becomes an ocean, or a waterfall, or applause. This phenomenon, called dream incorporation, has been documented and studied for well over a century. One of the most famous formal demonstrations came from sleep researchers who sprayed a fine, gentle mist of water onto sleeping participants during REM sleep, then woke them shortly after to ask about their dreams. A significant portion reported dream content involving water, rain, a leak, even, in some cases, wetting the bed, despite having received no direct information about what had actually happened to them. The sleeping brain, it turns out, doesn't fully switch off its sensory processing. Real external stimuli, sound, touch, temperature, even smell, continue to be detected and processed to some degree, and the dreaming mind, already deep in the business of constructing a narrative, appears to weave these signals directly into whatever story is already unfolding, usually reframed into something that fits the dream's existing logic rather than being recognized for what it actually is. This is part of why a persistent real-world irritant, like an uncomfortable sleeping position or a cold draft, so often surfaces in dream form before it's strong enough to fully wake you, your mind's way of registering a problem and trying, within its own dream logic, to quietly work around it. Even fast asleep, some small, quiet part of your mind is still listening to the actual room around you, translating it gently and strangely into whatever story it happens to be telling that night. Some dreams borrow directly from the room around you, but the deeper question of why the mind dreams at all still doesn't have one single, agreed-upon answer. Nobody fully agrees on why we dream at all. Despite over a century of dedicated research, there's still no single theory of why humans dream that the scientific community broadly agrees on. Only several serious, competing explanations, each with real supporting evidence. One prominent idea, threat simulation theory, proposes that dreaming evolved as a kind of safe rehearsal space, allowing the brain to practice responding to dangerous or threatening scenarios without any real-world risk. A theory supported by research showing dreams do disproportionately feature threatening or challenging situations compared to ordinary waking life. Another leading view ties dreaming closely to the memory consolidation process discussed earlier tonight, proposing that dreams are, in part, a kind of byproduct or side effect of the brain actively sorting, strengthening, and integrating the day's experiences into long-term memory. A third perspective, sometimes called the emotional regulation theory, suggests dreaming helps process and diffuse difficult emotional experiences overnight in a psychologically safer context than full waking consciousness, supported by research finding that emotionally difficult memories are sometimes recalled as less distressing after a night's sleep involving dreaming compared to before it. These theories aren't necessarily in direct competition. Dreaming may simply serve several of these functions simultaneously, or different functions on different nights. Even now, with modern brain imaging and decades of careful research, the honest answer to why do we dream remains genuinely, actively unsettled. One of the most universal human experiences there is, happening to nearly everyone, nearly every night, for the entirety of recorded history, and we still can't fully agree on what it's actually for. Why we dream is still genuinely debated. What happens when a mind is pushed to explain its own choices, though, has a much stranger, well-documented answer. Why your mind sometimes makes up a reason on the spot. In a series of remarkable studies beginning in the 1960s and 70s, neuroscientists worked with a small number of patients who had undergone a rare surgical procedure severing the connection between the brain's two hemispheres, originally performed as a treatment for severe epilepsy. Because the two hemispheres process certain types of information somewhat separately and largely control opposite sides of the body, researchers could show an image or instruction to just one hemisphere at a time without the other hemisphere directly receiving that same information. In one particularly striking type of trial, researchers could prompt the right hemisphere, which typically doesn't control language production, to trigger a simple action like standing up or picking up an object, and then ask the patient verbally why they'd just done it. Since the verbal, language-producing left hemisphere genuinely had no access to the real reason, it would instead confidently generate a plausible-sounding explanation on the spot. I felt like getting a drink, with no apparent awareness that it was inventing the reason rather than reporting one. Researchers call this confabulation, and follow-up research suggests something genuinely humbling. Everyday explanations for our own behavior and preferences, even in people with fully intact, connected brains, may rely on this same basic storytelling instinct far more often than most people realize. A mind that's remarkably good at narrating a confident, coherent reason, whether or not that reason is actually the real one. Your mind isn't lying to you exactly when it explains itself. It's just doing what it's always done, building you the best, most confident story it can, as quickly as it possibly can, whether or not it was actually given all the facts. Your mind can invent a story about a small choice in an instant, and yet some single moments get burned in so deeply they feel like they'll never fade at all. The memories that feel impossible to ever lose. Ask people where they were during a major, emotionally significant public event, and many will describe the moment in vivid, confident, almost photographic detail. The room, the lighting, who else was there, exactly what they were doing right before. Psychologists call these flashbulb memories, a term coined in the mid-1970s to describe the striking vividness and confidence with which people recall the exact circumstances surrounding shocking or highly emotional news, as though the mind had captured a single, perfectly preserved photograph of that instant. Researchers believe the amygdala, a small structure deep in the brain closely involved in processing strong emotion, plays a significant role. Intense emotional arousal appears to genuinely strengthen memory encoding for the surrounding details, which is part of why emotionally powerful moments tend to stick with unusual clarity compared to ordinary ones. Here's the genuinely humbling part, though. Carefully designed studies that ask the same people to describe a flashbulb memory shortly after the event, and then again years later, consistently find real, measurable inaccuracies creeping in over time. Details changed, sequences reordered, even as the person's own confidence in the memory's accuracy stays remarkably, stubbornly high. The memory feels perfectly preserved. It usually isn't, quite. Not a flawless photograph then, but something gentler and stranger. A moment your mind cared about so much that it kept confidently retelling the story, a little differently each time, for as long as you kept asking to hear it. One more small, ordinary thing your mind does before we let it finally rest for the night. The sound that isn't really there right before sleep. Right at the edge of sleep, some people hear a sudden, loud bang, crash, or explosion-like sound, seemingly from nowhere, jolting them fully awake, despite there being no actual sound in the room at all. This is a real, documented, and genuinely benign experience called exploding head syndrome, an unfortunately dramatic name for a harmless parasomnia, a category of unusual experiences that occur specifically during the transitions into or out of sleep. Researchers believe it may result from a brief, harmless miscommunication among brain regions during the transition into sleep, possibly related to a delay in one part of the brain shutting down slightly out of sync with others, similar in spirit to the hypnic jerk from the very start of tonight, but affecting auditory perception instead of the body's muscles. It's more common than most people realize, and despite the alarming name and the startling experience of it in the moment, it carries no evidence of any underlying danger. Most people who experience it need no treatment at all, beyond simply understanding what it is, which alone tends to reduce how distressing future episodes feel. A single, silent, imaginary bang, your mind's wiring briefly, harmlessly, tripping over its own feet on the way out the door for the night, and nothing more than that at all. The last thing your mind does before letting go. In the final minutes before true sleep, your brain passes through a distinct transitional state called hypnagogia, no longer fully awake, not yet fully asleep, a strange, brief borderland with its own peculiar rules. During this window, many people experience fleeting, dreamlike sensory fragments while still technically conscious. A flash of a face that isn't anyone you know, a snippet of half-formed conversation, a brief sense of falling or floating. Some researchers believe this is the earliest, most porous edge of dreaming itself, arriving before full unconsciousness has actually taken hold. Notably, many well-documented creative breakthroughs are said to have arrived in exactly this state. Figures across science and the arts have described solutions and ideas surfacing right at this threshold, when the mind's usual rigid, waking logic has loosened but conscious awareness hasn't fully switched off yet. Some people deliberately try to linger in this state a little longer, precisely for that reason. And then, usually without any clear, noticeable final moment, awareness simply quietly stops. There's no experience of, and now I'm asleep. One moment, you're loosely, drowsily aware. The next, entire hours have simply passed, gently, without you. 28 small, strange, ordinary things your mind does every single day, mostly without you ever asking it to or thanking it for any of them. It's still doing several of them right now, actually, quietly, whether or not you're still listening. That's where we'll leave it tonight. The jolt right before sleep. The tickle that never quite lands on your own hand. A moment that felt like it already happened. A word that suddenly seemed to follow you everywhere. Most of a dream, gone by breakfast. A mind still quietly working, even doing nothing at all. A few harmless seconds caught between asleep and awake. An unfinished task that won't quite let go. Your longest dreams saved for last. A memory quietly filed away while you slept. Sheep that never really helped. A pattern that keeps replaying long after you've stopped. A yawn passed gently from one person to the next. The years you'll never remember, and no fault in that. A single criticism outweighing 5 kind words, a steady hum, quieting a restless mind. A mind that starts showing you things when there's nothing left to see. Your own clock, set before you ever chose a bedtime. A dream, and knowing, somehow, that it's only a dream. A worry, arriving at the 1-hour reason had already gone to bed. A gap in your sight you've never once seen. Sleep, arriving only once you stop chasing it. The rain outside, quietly becoming an ocean inside a dream. A question about dreaming that nobody has fully answered yet. A reason invented on the spot and believed completely. A memory that feels perfect and almost never is. A silent, imaginary bang right on the way out the door. And somewhere just past all of it, a moment with no clear edge at all, where you were quietly, drowsily aware, and then, gently, you simply weren't. None of it needs solving tonight. It never did. If your eyes are already closed, that's exactly where they should be. And if they're still open just a little, there's another quiet mind waiting to be understood, right after this one, whenever you're ready. No rush, no sound, just drifting gently into whatever comes next.